The desert wind carried an unusual chill through Phoenix on the night of October 12, 1997, rattling the corrugated metal siding of Martinez Auto Repair on East Van Buren Street. Inside the cluttered garage, 43-year-old Danny Martinez wiped his grease-stained hands on a red shop towel, the fluorescent lights overhead casting harsh shadows across the engine block he'd been working on since noon. The clock on the wall, a faded Snap-on Tools promotional piece with a cracked face, read 9:47 p.m. Danny should have been home hours ago, but that was the thing about being a small business owner in South Phoenix. The work never really ended. His navy blue Dickies work shirt, embroidered with his name in cursive yellow thread, was soaked through with sweat despite the October evening. The smell of motor oil, brake fluid, and old coffee hung in the air like it always did, familiar and somehow comforting. Danny took a long drink from a dented thermos, grimacing at the cold, bitter coffee inside, then turned back to the stubborn transmission that had occupied his entire Sunday. He never saw Monday morning. Danny Martinez had opened his garage in 1989, just shy of his 35th birthday, after working nearly 2 decades for other people. He'd started as a teenager, learning from his uncle Roberto at a shop in Maryvale, his hands memorizing the feel of tools before his mind fully understood their purpose. By the time he was 20, Danny could diagnose an engine problem by sound alone, a talent that had earned him a reputation throughout Phoenix's working-class neighborhoods. His wife, Eleanor, told anyone who would listen that Danny had a gift, that he could hear what cars were trying to say. They'd married young, just 19 and 18, and built their life together piece by piece, paycheck by paycheck. Their daughter, Sophia, was born in 1978, followed by their son, Miguel, 3 years later. By 1997, Sophia was a sophomore at Arizona State University, studying business administration, while Miguel was finishing his senior year at South Mountain High School, the same school Danny had graduated from in 1972. The garage itself sat on a corner lot, a squat cinder block building painted an optimistic yellow that had faded to something closer to Manila under the relentless Arizona sun. A hand-painted sign hung above the bay doors: Martinez Auto Repair, honest work, fair prices. Danny's 1994 Ford F-150, navy blue with chrome running boards, was always parked in the same spot out front, angled toward the street like it was ready to leave at a moment's notice. Inside, the garage was organized chaos: parts on metal shelving units, tools hanging on pegboards, a radio perpetually tuned to cool 94.5 FM playing oldies. Danny kept a small office in the back corner. Really just a desk, a filing cabinet, and a Mr. Coffee machine that was older than his marriage. Photographs covered one wall: Sophia in her graduation cap and gown, Miguel in his Little League uniform, Eleanor at their 15th anniversary dinner at Los Dos Molinos. Danny was known for 3 things in the neighborhood: his skill with engines, his willingness to work with customers on payment plans, and his habit of staying late. He'd grown up poor. His father had worked construction, his mother cleaned houses, and he never forgot what it felt like to need your car to get to work, but not have the money to fix it. So Danny would stay open late, take calls on Sundays, accept payments in installments. Elena worried about him working too much, about the stress of trying to compete with the big chain shops on the east side. But Danny would just smile and say the neighborhood needed him. He was right. On any given evening, you could find families waiting in the small lobby area, kids doing homework on the worn vinyl chairs, while Danny worked magic under their families' hoods. He had a ritual, a superstition really, that he'd followed for years. Every night before closing, Danny would walk the perimeter of the garage, checking the locks on the bay doors, making sure the air compressor was off, shutting down the overhead lights one by one. Then, he'd set the alarm, a system he'd installed himself in 1993 after a string of break-ins hit businesses along Van Buren, and leave through the front door, always looking back once before getting in his truck. Eleanor teased him about it, said he looked at that building the way other men looked at other women. He'd just laugh and say the garage had been good to them, had put Sophia through college, would put Miguel through too if he wanted to go. Respect what takes care of you, Danny would say. It was practically his motto. On that Saturday night in October, Danny had plans. Sophia was coming home from Tempe for Sunday dinner, bringing her new boyfriend for the family to meet. Eleanor had been cooking all day. Her famous chili colorado, homemade tortillas, arroz rojo, frijoles charros. The house would smell like comfort and celebration. Miguel had promised to clean the garage, the one at home, not the shop. And Danny had picked up Sophia's favorite dessert, flan from the panaderia on 16th Street, earlier that afternoon. It sat in the small refrigerator in his office, waiting. The dinner was set for 6 o'clock Sunday evening, which gave Danny plenty of time to finish the transmission job and clean up. He'd promised Eleanor he'd be home by noon at the latest. She'd made him promise twice actually, holding his face in her hands and making him look her in the eyes. No working through Sunday dinner, Daniel Martinez. Not this time. He'd promised. He'd meant it. At 10:23 p.m. on Sunday, October 12, 1997, the phone in Danny's office rang. According to the call, log later pulled by investigators, the call lasted 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Danny's pen sat on the desk blotter, a phone number scrawled in his distinctive left-handed scrawl, 602-555-0147. Below it, an address, 2847 E. Watkins Street. Below that, a single word, alternator. The handwriting was hurried, the numbers slightly tilted, as if written while standing, while already moving toward the door. Danny's neighbor from 2 buildings down, Hector Reyes, who ran a small plumbing supply business, was locking up his own shop when he saw Danny emerge from Martinez Auto Repair at approximately 10:35 p.m. Hector would later tell the police that Danny was moving quickly, carrying his large red toolbox in one hand and what looked like an alternator in the other. Danny had called out to him, "Emergency call, Hector, see you tomorrow," and climbed into his F-150. The truck's headlights swept across the darkened street as Danny pulled away, heading east on Van Buren. Hector remembered thinking it was odd that Danny hadn't set the alarm, hadn't done his usual closing routine. The lights in the garage were still on. The bay door was still unlocked. Hector Reyes was the last person to see Danny Martinez alive. When Elena woke at 6:30 a.m. on Monday morning, Danny's side of the bed was untouched. The floral patterned comforter was still tucked in exactly as she'd made it the previous morning. His pillow still had the slight depression where his head should have been, but hadn't been. She told herself not to panic. Danny had occasionally fallen asleep at the garage before, usually in the office chair, waking with a stiff neck and a sheepish apology. She called the garage. The phone rang and rang, that hollow sound of an empty building. She called his pager, punching in their home number followed by 911, their code for urgent. No response. She called the garage again. Still nothing. By 7:15 a.m., Eleanor was in her car, a 1991 Honda Accord that Danny had rebuilt for her as an anniversary present, driving the familiar route to East Van Buren Street. The morning sun was already hot, promising another scorching October day. When she pulled into the garage parking lot, Danny's truck wasn't there, but the lights were on inside, visible through the grimy windows. The front door was unlocked. When she pushed it open, the bell above the door, the one Danny had installed, so he'd always know when someone entered, chimed its familiar greeting. "Danny," her voice echoed in the empty space. The garage was exactly as he'd left it. Tools scattered on the workbench, the transmission still sitting on the lift, his coffee thermos on the desk, still half full, the radio playing softly, morning DJs laughing about something that didn't matter. But Danny was gone. His toolbox was gone. And when Eleanor checked the small refrigerator in the office, Sophia's flan was still there, untouched, waiting for a celebration that would never happen. Eleanor called the Phoenix Police Department at 7:43 a.m. The dispatcher tried to explain that an adult missing for less than 12 hours wasn't technically a missing person case yet, that Danny had probably just taken an emergency call and lost track of time, that he'd probably walk through the door any minute. But something in Eleanor's voice, a mother's intuition, a wife's certainty, convinced the dispatcher to send an officer to take a report. Officer Jennifer Walsh arrived at Martinez Auto Repair at 8:20 a.m., her patrol car's presence drawing curious looks from other business owners opening their shops for the week. She was 28 years old, 4 years into her career with Phoenix PD, and she'd taken dozens of missing person reports. Most of them resolved within hours. People got drunk and forgot to call home. People had affairs and made poor choices. People got into arguments and needed space. But as she listened to Elena Martinez describe her husband, his routines, his reliability, his absolute devotion to his family, Officer Walsh felt the small hairs on the back of her neck stand up. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to show me everything exactly as you found it," Walsh said, pulling out her notebook. Eleanor walked her through the garage, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. She showed Walsh the phone with the scrawled address. She showed her Danny's unfinished work. She showed her the flan in the refrigerator, which broke her completely. "He bought this for Sophia," she sobbed. "He never misses family dinner. Never. Something's wrong. Something's happened to him." Officer Walsh made a decision that would later be credited with keeping the case from going completely cold. She called for a detective. Detective Marcus Chen of the Phoenix Police Department's Missing Persons Unit arrived at 9:15 a.m. At 41 years old, Chen was a 12-year veteran of the department, a meticulous investigator known for his patient interview style and his refusal to dismiss cases as probably nothing. He'd seen too many probably nothings turn into homicides. He wore khakis and a blue button-down shirt, his detective's badge clipped to his belt, and he listened to Eleanor's story with an intensity that made her feel, for the first time that morning, like someone was taking this seriously. "Mrs. Martinez," he said gently, "I'm going to need to ask you some difficult questions. Is there any possibility that Danny was having financial troubles, marital problems, any reason he might have chosen to leave?" Eleanor's answer was immediate and absolute. "No, none. We've been married 24 years, detective. I know my husband. He wouldn't leave us. He couldn't. Something has happened to him. And every minute we spent talking about whether he wanted to leave is a minute wasted finding out what actually happened." Chen believed her. Within 2 hours, Chen had organized a canvass of every business within a 3-block radius of Martinez Auto Repair. He sent officers to the address Danny had written down, 2847 E. Watkins Street, which turned out to be a vacant lot, abandoned and overgrown with dead weeds. The phone number Danny had scrawled was traced to a payphone outside a Circle K convenience store on Baseline Road, 4 miles south. Store surveillance tapes from Sunday night showed nothing useful. The phone was visible in the frame, but the angle was wrong to capture faces, and the timestamp showed the phone had been used dozens of times that evening. The address was fake, the caller was untraceable. And Danny Martinez had driven into the Phoenix night and disappeared. Chen called in K9 units. The dogs tracked Danny's scent from the garage to where his truck had been parked, then lost it. He was in his vehicle. He'd driven away. But where? By Monday afternoon, Detective Chen had expanded the search. He contacted the Arizona Department of Public Safety, requesting any traffic stops or accidents involving Danny's truck, a navy blue 1994 Ford F-150, Arizona license plate AKZ4739. Nothing. He checked area hospitals. Nothing. He contacted the highway patrol. Nothing. He pulled Danny's credit card records and bank statements. No activity after Sunday afternoon when Danny had stopped for gas at a Chevron station near his home, filling up the F-150 and buying a pack of spearmint gum, his usual purchase. The receipt, time-stamped at 4:47 p.m., would be the last confirmed financial transaction Danny ever made. Miguel Martinez, 17 years old and suddenly the man of the house, spent Monday afternoon making photocopies of his father's photograph at a Kinko's on 7th Avenue. The photo he chose showed Danny at Sophia's high school graduation, wearing his best shirt and a proud smile, his arm around his daughter. Miguel made 500 copies. By Monday evening, his face was plastered on telephone poles, in shop windows, on community boards throughout South Phoenix. Missing. Danny Martinez, 43, last seen, Sunday night, October 12th. If you have any information, please call Phoenix PD. The local news picked up the story Tuesday morning. Channel 12 sent a reporter to interview Eleanor on the steps of the garage. She held Danny's red toolbox, the one that was missing, the one she'd bought him for Christmas 5 years earlier. Wait, no, she held a photograph of Danny holding that toolbox. Her voice shook as she pleaded for information. Someone knows something. Someone saw something. Please, he's a good man. He's a husband and a father, and this neighborhood needs him. Please, if you know anything at all, come forward. The community responded. The Phoenix Police Department received 47 tips in the first 48 hours. They all led nowhere. Someone thought they saw Danny's truck near Sky Harbor Airport. It was the wrong shade of blue. Someone thought they saw Danny at a restaurant in Scottsdale. The man was 60 and white. Someone claimed Danny owed them money and had fled to Mexico. Danny's financial records showed no debt beyond a manageable mortgage. Someone called with psychic visions. Chen listened politely and filed the information away. On Wednesday, October 15th, Detective Chen organized a formal search. 137 volunteers gathered at Martinez Auto Repair at dawn. They came from the neighborhood. Customers Danny had helped over the years, other business owners, friends from church, kids Miguel and Sofia had grown up with. They spread out in teams, covering a 20-square-mile area south and east of the garage, the most likely routes Danny would have taken toward the fake address. They searched empty lots, abandoned buildings, desert scrubland. They looked for any sign of the navy blue F-150, any sign of Danny, any sign of his red toolbox. They found nothing. By Thursday, the Arizona Department of Public Safety deployed a helicopter equipped with thermal imaging cameras, searching the Sonoran Desert south of Phoenix for any sign of a body or a vehicle. The helicopter covered 140 square miles in 6 hours. The thermal cameras detected coyotes, javelinas, and 3 different homeless encampments. They did not detect Danny Martinez or his truck. On Friday, October 17th, Detective Chen held a press conference outside Phoenix Police Headquarters. Television cameras recorded as he stood behind a podium, Eleanor and Sofia flanking him on one side, Miguel on the other. "We are actively investigating the disappearance of Daniel Martinez," Chen said, his voice carrying across the gathered reporters. "We believe Danny responded to a phone call requesting emergency automotive service on Sunday night, October 12th, and that this call may be connected to his disappearance. We are asking anyone who was in the area of East Van Buren Street between 10 p.m. and midnight on that night to contact us. Any information, no matter how insignificant it may seem, could be crucial." A reporter asked the question everyone was thinking. "Detective Chen, do you believe Danny Martinez is still alive?" The pause before Chen's answer lasted 3 seconds. It felt like an hour. "We're exploring all possibilities," he said carefully. "But I want to be honest with the Martinez family and this community. As time passes, our concern grows." Eleanor's sob was caught on every camera. Days turned to weeks. Weeks turned to months. Months turned to years. The case of Danny Martinez's disappearance became what detectives grimly referred to as a cold case. By the summer of 1998, the active investigation was scaled back. Detective Chen still worked the case when new tips came in, which they did, especially around holidays or the anniversary of Danny's disappearance. But other cases demanded attention. Phoenix was growing rapidly in the late 1990s, and with growth came crime. Homicides, assaults, robberies. The missing mechanic from South Phoenix, tragic as his case was, became one file among many. But the Martinez family never stopped looking. Eleanor kept the garage open. She hired a mechanic named Paul Gomez to do the actual repair work. But she came in every day, sitting at Danny's desk, answering the phone the way he used to. "Martinez Auto Repair, how can I help you?" Customers who'd known Danny for years made a point of bringing their cars there, a show of loyalty and support. The wall of photographs in the office grew. Sofia's ASU graduation in 1999, Miguel's high school graduation the same year, Sofia's wedding in 2001. Spaces were left empty in those photos. negative spaces where Danny should have been standing. Every October 12th, the family held a vigil outside the garage. The first year, 2008, 200 people came, holding candles as the sun set, sharing stories about Danny, his generosity, his laugh, the way he'd fixed your car and refused payment when he knew you were struggling, how he'd taught neighborhood kids about engines in his spare time, how he'd always made time for people. By the 10th anniversary in 2007, the crowd had dwindled to about 50, still a testament to Danny's impact, but a reminder that memories fade, that life moves on, even when you don't want it to. Sophia Martinez Chen. She'd married Alex Chen, a corporate attorney, no relation to Detective Marcus Chen, became an advocate for missing persons families. She started a non-profit called Unfinished Stories that helped families navigate the bureaucracy of missing persons cases, that kept pressure on law enforcement to maintain investigations, that provided support groups for families living in the awful limbo of not knowing. She gave interviews on local news programs, always starting by saying, "My father, Danny Martinez, disappeared on October 12th, 1997. We still don't know what happened to him, but we will never stop looking." Miguel followed a different path. He'd planned to go to ASU like his sister, but after Danny disappeared, he couldn't bring himself to leave his mother alone. He took classes at Phoenix College, eventually earning a degree in criminal justice. In 2002, he was accepted into the Phoenix Police Department Academy. When he graduated 6 months later, Elena Martinez sat in the audience weeping, proud and heartbroken all at once. Miguel's first assignment was to patrol division in South Phoenix, not far from his father's garage. He told his training officer that first day, "I'm going to find out what happened to my dad. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but I'm going to find out." Detective Marcus Chen retired from Phoenix PD in 2009 after a distinguished 22-year career. His replacement in missing persons, Detective Lisa Morales, inherited 117 open cases. The Danny Martinez file was marked cold, no active leads, and moved to a storage facility on the outskirts of Phoenix where inactive case files were kept. The original evidence, the phone number Danny had written, the receipts from his desk, photographs of the garage as Eleanor had found it that Monday morning, sat in a cardboard box in row 47, shelf 12, case number 97, MPH 14113. For 14 years, that's where it stayed. Elena Martinez aged in the way that profound grief ages people, not just in years, but in the weight carried in their eyes, the set of their shoulders, the way they moved through the world. She turned 60 in 2011, then 65 in 2016. Sophia gave her 3 grandchildren, 2 girls and a boy. Miguel got married in 2010 to his high school sweetheart, Rosa, and had twin boys in 2013. Eleanor's hair went from black to grey to white. The garage remained open. Danny's desk remained his desk, even though Eleanor had long since moved her paperwork to a new workspace. The photographs on the wall multiplied. Grandchildren's birthdays, school plays, little league games. But that one empty space remained, a constant reminder of the absence at the center of their family. The house on Sunny Slope Avenue, the one Danny and Eleanor had bought in 1979, with a loan from Eleanor's parents, the one they'd painted yellow because Eleanor loved yellow, the one where they'd raised their children, remained almost exactly as it had been on October 12th, 1997. Eleanor couldn't bring herself to change Danny's side of the closet. His work shirt still hung there. The smell of motor oil faded, but not entirely gone. His steel-toed work boots sat by the back door. His coffee mug, a Father's Day gift from Sophia in 1992 that read, "World's Best Dad," remained in the cabinet, unused but there, waiting. "I can't get rid of his things," Eleanor told a grief counselor in 2003. "What if he comes home? What if he walks through that door and finds out I gave away his life?" The counselor had gently suggested that maybe it was time to accept that Danny wasn't coming home. Eleanor had fired that counselor. She hired private investigators 3 times over the years. The first, in 1999, took her money and produced a 50-page report that concluded Danny had likely been the victim of foul play, but offered no new leads. The second, in 2005, was more blunt. Mrs. Martinez, whoever called your husband that night, knew what they were doing. The fake address, the untraceable phone. This was planned. But after 8 years, any physical evidence is gone. I'm sorry. The third, in 2010, was more optimistic, talking about advances in forensic technology and cold case databases. He worked the case for 6 months before admitting defeat. But something shifted in 2015. Phoenix Police Department, like departments across the country, began receiving grant funding for cold case investigations. New technology, particularly in DNA analysis and digital forensics, meant that cases considered unsolvable in the 1990s could potentially be cracked open. The department formed a dedicated cold case unit with 6 detectives and 2 analysts. They began systematically reviewing every unsolved homicide and missing persons case from the previous 30 years. In March 2017, Detective James Russo, a 15-year veteran assigned to the cold case unit, pulled the Martinez file. Detective James Russo was not the sentimental type. At 43 years old, with a shaved head, a grey goatee, and reading glasses perpetually perched on top of his head, Russo approached cold cases with methodical precision. He didn't believe in gut feelings or hunches. He believed in evidence, in patterns, in the digital trails that modern criminals didn't realize they left behind. When he opened the Martinez file on March 7, 2017, he expected to spend maybe an hour reviewing it before moving on to the next case. He spent 6 hours. By the time he looked up, it was dark outside. The case bothered him immediately. The obvious staging, the fake address, the payphone, the deliberate luring of Danny Martinez away from his garage at night. This wasn't random. This wasn't opportunistic. Someone had planned this. Someone had known Danny would respond to an emergency call. Someone had known he'd come alone, that he was the type of man who would help a stranger at 10:30 at night. Russo began by running the phone number through modern databases. The payphone that had been used to call Danny no longer existed. The Circle K had been demolished and rebuilt in 2004. But Russo could pull the phone company records showing every call made from that phone on October 12, 1997. There were 63 calls. He began the tedious process of tracking down every number called, every person associated with those calls. 59 of the calls were easily explained. Local calls to homes and businesses, people checking in with family, people making dinner plans. 3 calls were to other payphones, likely drug deals. But Russo followed those leads anyway. They led nowhere. The 63rd call was to Martinez Auto Repair. Russo pulled Danny's business records, looking at every customer who'd used his services in the 6 months before his disappearance. The records were meticulous. Danny had kept detailed logs of every job, every customer, every part ordered. 347 customers. Russo began running background checks on all of them. On April 3, 2017, Russo got his first break. Customer number 132 was a man named Raymond Ray Booker. Booker had brought his 1989 Chevy Silverado to Danny's garage on September 15, 1997 for brake work. According to Danny's notes, the job had cost $387. Danny's note also included something unusual. Customer disputed final cost. Argued should be cheaper. Paid, but angry. Russo ran Booker's name through the system. Raymond Booker, 53 years old in 1997, lived in South Phoenix, just 3 miles from Martinez Auto Repair. He had a criminal record. Assault in 1983, domestic violence in 1986, aggravated assault in 1994. He'd served 2 years in Arizona State Prison for the 1994 assault charge. He was released in August 1996, 14 months before Danny Martinez disappeared. Russo's heart rate kicked up a notch. This was something. He dug deeper. Booker's employment records showed he'd worked as a truck driver for a furniture delivery company in 1997. The company had since gone out of business, but Russo tracked down the former owner, a 72-year-old retiree living in Prescott. The owner remembered Booker clearly. Mean son of a bitch, had a temper, scared some of our customers. I fired him in November, maybe December of 97. He threatened me, said I'd regret it. I took him seriously enough to file a report with Phoenix PD. Russo pulled that police report. It was dated November 18th, 1997. Just 5 weeks after Danny Martinez disappeared. But when Russo tried to locate Raymond Booker in 2017, he hit a wall. Booker's trail went cold in 2003. His last known address was an apartment complex in Mesa that had been torn down. His driver's license had been expired for 14 years. No tax returns filed. No property records. No employment records. Raymond Booker had either died or didn't want to be found. Russo spent 2 months tracking down Booker's known associates, his family members, anyone who might know where he'd gone. He found Booker's ex-wife, Diane Booker, living in Tucson. She'd divorced Raymond in 1998, shortly after he'd disappeared from her life. "I woke up one morning and he was just gone," she told Russo over the phone. "Took his clothes, his truck, and vanished." Honestly, detective, it was a relief. Ray was not a good man. He had a violent streak a mile wide. "Did he ever mention Danny Martinez?" Russo asked. "Or Martinez Auto Repair?" There was a pause. "I remember Ray was furious about a mechanic once. Said the guy had overcharged him, said he'd teach him a lesson. But that was the fall of '97, right before Ray left. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Ray was always angry about something." Russo's hands tightened on his phone. Did he say how he was going to teach this mechanic a lesson? No. But knowing Ray, nothing good. Russo hung up and immediately put out a nationwide bolo, "Be on the lookout for Raymond Booker." He sent Booker's photograph, his description, his social security number to every law enforcement agency in the country. He uploaded Booker's information to the National Crime Information Center database. He contacted the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. And then he waited. 3 weeks later, on July 19th, 2017, Russo got a call from the Mojave County Sheriff's Department. Deputy Sarah Kincaid had been patrolling Highway 93 between Wickiup and Nothing, Arizona. Yes, that was the actual name of the town. When she spotted a broken-down RV on the side of the road. It was 6:30 a.m., already hot, and the RV looked like it had been there a while. Being a good Samaritan and being bored on a long stretch of empty highway, she pulled over to check if the occupants needed help. An elderly man emerged from the RV, squinting in the early morning sun. He was thin, weathered, with a long grey beard and a canvas hat pulled low over his eyes. "Morning, officer," he said carefully. "Just having some engine trouble. I'll get it sorted." "You need me to call a tow truck?" Kincaid asked, noting the California plates on the RV. "No, ma'am. I'm a mechanic by trade. Just need to let the engine cool down and I'll be on my way." Something about the man's voice, the way he avoided eye contact, pinged Kincaid's radar. She'd been a deputy for 9 years, and she'd learned to trust that instinct. "Sir, can I see your license and registration?" The man hesitated. Just a fraction of a second, but Kincaid saw it. "Sure thing," he said, ducking back into the RV. Kincaid's hand moved to her service weapon, not drawing it, just resting it on the grip. It was a move she didn't consciously decide to make. The man emerged with a California driver's license. The name on it was Robert Baker. The photo looked like him, same beard, same weathered face, but something felt wrong. "Mr. Baker, I'm just going to run this, okay? Standard procedure." She returned to her patrol car and entered the license information into her computer. While she waited for the results, she ran the RV's plates. They came back registered to Robert Baker. Address in San Bernardino, California. Everything checked out. Except it didn't. The California DMV photo for Robert Baker looked similar to the man standing by the RV, but something was off. The bone structure wasn't quite right. The ears were different. Kincaid had taken a facial recognition course 6 months earlier, learning to look at the immutable features, the distance between eyes, the shape of the skull, and this didn't match. On a hunch, she ran the license through the federal database, checking for any flags. The computer screen flashed red. Robert Baker's social security number had been issued to a man who died in Bakersfield, California, in 2002. Kincaid's pulse jumped. She radioed for backup, then approached the RV again, this time with her hand definitively on her weapon. "Mr. Baker, I need you to step out of the vehicle with your hands visible. The man's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, fear, resignation, in the span of 2 seconds. Is there a problem, officer? Step out of the vehicle, now. What happened next unfolded in slow motion. The man turned as if to comply, then suddenly bolted, running toward the open desert. Kincaid shouted for him to stop, but he kept running, remarkably fast for a man who looked to be in his 70s. Kincaid took off after him, calling in the pursuit on her radio. She caught him after 100 yards, tackling him into the scrub brush. As she cuffed him, breathing hard, she said, "Robert Baker died 15 years ago. So who the hell are you?" The man, face pressed into the dirt, said nothing. Kincaid hauled him back to her patrol car and ran his fingerprints through AFIS, the automated fingerprint identification system. The results came back in 90 seconds. Raymond Booker, wanted for questioning in connection with a missing persons case in Phoenix. Multiple assault convictions. Last known location: unknown. Kincaid couldn't believe it. She'd just stumbled onto a fugitive by sheer luck on a random traffic stop in the middle of nowhere. She called Detective James Russo directly. When he answered, she said, "Detective Russo, Deputy Sarah Kincaid, Mojave County Sheriff. I'm standing here with a man named Raymond Booker. I understand you've been looking for him." There was a long pause on the line. Then Russo's voice, tight with controlled excitement. "Deputy Kincaid, do not let that man out of your sight. I'm on my way." Detective James Russo made the 3-hour drive from Phoenix to Wickiup in 2 hours and 40 minutes. He arrived to find Raymond Booker sitting in the back of Deputy Kincaid's patrol car, staring straight ahead with an expression of complete resignation. Russo took a moment before approaching, studying the man through the window. Booker was 73 years old now, but he still had the build of someone who'd worked with his hands his whole life. His eyes, when they met Russo's through the glass, were cold. "Mr. Booker," Russo said, opening the car door. "I'm Detective James Russo with Phoenix PD. We need to talk about Danny Martinez." Booker's face twitched, just barely, but Russo saw it. "I want a lawyer," Booker said. "That's your right," Russo replied. "But I'm going to explain something to you first. We have forensic technology now that didn't exist in 1997. We have databases, GPS tracking, cell phone tower data, digital footprints that you can't erase. And we have time. I have all the time in the world to build a case against you. Or you can talk to me now, and maybe, just maybe, you can explain what happened. Maybe this was an accident. Maybe it got out of hand. Maybe you've been carrying this for 20 years and you want to tell someone." Booker stared at him. "I want a lawyer." Russo nodded. "Okay, that's how we're going to do this." Booker was transported to the Mojave County Jail and held on the outstanding warrant. Technically, he was wanted for identity theft and fraud for using Robert Baker's identity, charges that could hold him while Russo built his case. Russo drove back to Phoenix and immediately assembled a task force. He needed to connect Raymond Boo to Danny Martinez's disappearance with hard evidence, not just suspicion. Over the next 6 weeks, Russo's team worked around the clock. They pulled every record associated with Raymond Booker: phone records, financial records, property records, employment records. They tracked down the 1989 Chevy Silverado Booker had owned in 1997. It had been sold in 1998 to a used car dealer in Tempe, then sold again 3 more times, finally ending up junked in 2006. The junkyard had long since crushed it, but junkyards keep records, and that junkyard had taken photographs of every vehicle before crushing it, for insurance purposes. Russo obtained those photographs. In one image, showing the truck bed of Booker's old Silverado, a forensic analyst spotted something: a small stain on the truck bed liner that looked consistent with blood. The truck was gone, but Russo had something better. He had Booker's storage unit. It turned out that when Booker had fled Phoenix in late 1997, he'd put some of his possessions in a storage unit in Mesa, Arizona. He'd paid for the unit annually, using money orders, maintaining it for nearly 20 years. But in 2016, the payments had stopped. the storage facility had eventually auctioned off the contents. Russo tracked down the man who'd won the auction, a reseller who bought storage units and sold the contents online. "Yeah, I remember that unit," the man told Russo. "Wasn't much in it. Old tools, some clothes, boxes of junk. I kept the tools, sold some of the other stuff, threw away the rest." "Where are the tools now?" Russo asked, his heart pounding. "In my garage, probably. I use them sometimes." Russo obtained a warrant and went to the man's house. In the garage, among various tools and equipment, he found a red toolbox. It was worn, scratched, the red paint faded in places. On the side, barely visible, was a name: Danny Martinez. It had been written in black permanent marker. Then someone had tried to scrub it off, but the letters were still there, ghost-like impressions in the metal. Russo's hands shook as he photographed it. He called Elena Martinez. "Mrs. Martinez, I need you to describe your husband's toolbox for me. Every detail you remember." Elena's voice was cautious, afraid to hope. "It was red. Snap-on brand. I bought it for him for Christmas in 1992. He kept it perfect, cleaned it every week. On the right side, about halfway down, there was a small dent from when Miguel dropped it in 1995. And inside, in the top tray, Danny kept a photograph of our family, tucked into a plastic sleeve." Russo opened the toolbox. The dent was there. The photograph was gone, but the plastic sleeve remained, empty, in the top tray. "Mrs. Martinez," Russo said gently, "we found Danny's toolbox." Elena's sob echoed through the phone. But finding the toolbox wasn't enough. Russo needed more. He needed a body. He needed a confession. He needed something that would definitively prove Raymond Booker had killed Danny Martinez. He got it from an unexpected source. In September 2017, Detective Lisa Morales, who'd inherited the Martinez case years earlier before it went to cold case, was reviewing old files when she came across something she'd overlooked before. In 1998, a hiker had called Phoenix PD to report finding burned debris in the desert near South Mountain Park, about 15 miles south of Martinez Auto Repair. The responding officer had noted the location, but determined it was probably just illegal dumping, nothing criminal. The debris had included what looked like burned clothing, melted plastic, and metal fragments. The officer had taken a few photographs and filed a report, but no evidence had been collected. Morales showed the report to Russo. "What if this wasn't random dumping?" she asked. Russo looked at the location on a map. It was directly south of Martinez Auto Repair, accessed by dirt roads that led into the desert. It was remote, isolated, the kind of place someone might go to dispose of evidence. "We need to go back there," Russo said. On September 18, 2017, almost exactly 20 years after Danny Martinez disappeared, Russo, Morales, and a team of forensic technicians drove into the desert south of South Mountain Park. Using the 1998 report's GPS coordinates, they located the site. It had been 2 decades, and the desert had reclaimed most of it, but Russo could still see signs of a fire, scorched earth, melted fragments of metal and plastic embedded in the sand. The forensic team set up a grid and began careful excavation. They worked for 3 days, sifting through sand and ash. On day 2, they found something. A belt buckle, heavily tarnished but still intact. It was oval-shaped, silver-colored, with a turquoise stone in the center. Russo photographed it and sent the image to Elena Martinez. Her response came 5 minutes later. "That's Danny's belt buckle. I bought it for him at a craft fair in Sedona in 1995. He wore it every day." On day 3, the forensic team found bone fragments. They were small, damaged by fire and 20 years of exposure to the elements, but they were unmistakably human. A forensic anthropologist examined them on site and determined they were consistent with an adult male. DNA testing would take weeks, but Russo knew. He knew these were Danny Martinez's remains. That night, he drove to Elena Martinez's home. Sofia and Miguel were there, along with grandchildren who'd never met their grandfather. Russo sat in the living room that Danny had painted, surrounded by photographs Danny had hung, and said the words the family had waited 20 years to hear. We found him. We found Danny. The DNA results came back on October 10th, 2017, 2 days before the 20th anniversary of Danny's disappearance. The bone fragments were a positive match to DNA samples provided by Sofia and Miguel. The remains were definitively those of Daniel Martinez. Russo now had a body. He had Danny's toolbox. He had a suspect with motive and opportunity. But he needed to place Raymond Booker at that desert site. He needed to prove Booker had killed Danny, burned his body, and fled. The breakthrough came from the RV. When Deputy Kincaid had impounded Booker's RV, it had been searched thoroughly. Inside, investigators found a small metal box hidden in a floor compartment. The box contained identification documents for Robert Baker, the dead man whose identity Booker had stolen, along with several other false IDs Booker had accumulated over the years. But there was something else in that box, a photograph. It showed a younger Raymond Booker standing next to a navy blue Ford F-150. He was smiling. Behind him, barely visible in the frame, was a sign, Martinez Auto Repair. The photograph had been taken at night. The lighting was poor, probably from a streetlight, but forensic image analysts enhanced it, clearing up the details. The date stamp on the back of the photo, printed by a 1990s instant camera, read 10/12/97, October 12th, 1997, the night Danny Martinez disappeared. Booker had taken a trophy photograph with Danny's truck. Russo had him. On October 12th, 2017, exactly 20 years after Danny's disappearance, Raymond Booker was formally charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and theft. He was extradited from Mojave County to Maricopa County and held without bail at the 4th Avenue Jail in Phoenix. The news broke like a thunderclap. Local media went into a frenzy. National media picked up the story. Cold case solved after 20 years. Phoenix mechanics killer caught. Elena Martinez, Miguel, and Sofia held a press conference outside the garage, now decorated with candles and flowers from the community. For 20 years, we've lived with a hole in our hearts, Elena said, her voice strong despite tears. Danny was taken from us by an evil act, by a man too cowardly to face justice. But today, finally, we have answers. Today, finally we can lay my husband to rest. Today, justice begins. Miguel stood beside his mother in his Phoenix PD uniform, his arm around her shoulders. Sofia clutched her father's photograph, the same one they'd copied 500 times 20 years earlier. Detective Russo stood in the background, wanting the moment to belong to the family. But Russo's work wasn't done. He needed a confession. He needed to know exactly what had happened that night. The interview room at Phoenix Police Headquarters was stark. White walls, a metal table, 2 chairs, a camera mounted in the corner. Raymond Booker sat on one side, his court-appointed attorney, a tired-looking woman named Margaret Simmons, beside him. Russo sat across from them, a thick folder in front of him. It was November 3rd, 2017. Booker had been in custody for 3 weeks. His attorney had advised him not to talk, but something had changed. Booker had asked for this meeting. He had something to say. "Mr. Booker," Russo began, "you asked to speak with me. I want to remind you that this conversation is being recorded, and anything you say can be used against you. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. Do you understand these rights?" "I understand," Booker said. His voice was rough, aged by years of cigarettes and desert air. "Do you wish to waive these rights and speak with me?" Booker looked at his attorney. She nodded slightly, resignation on her face. "I do." Russo opened the folder. Inside were photographs. Danny Martinez with his family, the toolbox, the belt buckle, the bone fragments, the trophy photograph. He spread them on the table methodically, letting Booker see each one. "Tell me what happened on October 12th, 1997. Booker stared at the photographs for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat, emotionless. "He ripped me off." Russo waited. "That Mexican mechanic charged me $400 for a simple brake job. Should have been half that. I told him he was ripping me off, but he wouldn't budge. Said that was the cost. Said I could take it or leave it. Booker's hands, handcuffed to the table and clenched into fists. I paid, but I was pissed. Real pissed. I couldn't stop thinking about it. $400 I didn't have. Money I needed for rent. And this greaser was getting rich off people like me. Russo's jaw tightened at the slur, but he kept his voice neutral. So what did you do? I waited. I watched his shop. I figured out his routine. He stayed late on Sundays, usually alone. So I called him from a payphone, made up a story about needing an emergency repair, gave him a fake address. I knew he'd come. Guys like him, they always come, always trying to help. Where did you wait for him? About half a mile from the fake address. On a side street, dark, no houses. When he pulled up, looking for the address, I flagged him down. Told him my truck broke down, needed help. He got out, friendly as could be, asking what the problem was. What happened next? Russo asked quietly. Booker's face hardened. We got into it. I told him he owed me money back. He looked at me like I was crazy, said he didn't know what I was talking about. I showed him the receipt from the brake job. He remembered then. Said the work was fair, the price was fair. He wasn't giving me anything back. Then, we argued. He tried to get back in his truck. I grabbed him, tried to stop him. He pushed me off, told me to get help. That's when I lost it. Booker paused. The room was silent except for the hum of the camera recording. I had a tire iron in my truck. I grabbed it, hit him. He went down, hit him again, and again. I couldn't stop. 20 years of people looking down on me, treating me like trash, and here's this guy telling me I was wrong, telling me to get help like I was some kind of animal. Russo's voice remained steady. Where did this happen? Right there on that side street. It was dark. No one around. When I stopped, he wasn't moving. He was dead. What did you do with the body? Panicked at first, sat there for I don't know how long. Then I realized I had to get rid of it. I had a tarp in my truck, wrapped him up, put him in my truck bed, drove his truck to a different location, left it in an alley downtown, figured it'd get stripped or stolen, never connected to me. Where's Danny's truck now? How the hell should I know? That was 20 years ago. Probably crushed in a junkyard somewhere. Russo made a note. They'd been searching for the truck for months with no luck. What did you do with Danny's body? Drove it out to the desert, south of town. Found a spot off the dirt roads, real isolated. Built a fire. Burned everything. The body, his clothes, his wallet. Took his toolbox because it had good tools in it. Kept it in storage for years. Why did you keep the photograph? The one showing you with Danny's truck? Booker's face twisted into something that might have been a smile. Souvenir. Proof I got away with it. Or so I thought. Did you plan to kill Danny Martinez that night? No. I just wanted to scare him. Make him give me my money back. But when he refused, when he looked at me like I was beneath him, Booker shook his head. Things got out of hand. Russo leaned back in his chair. Mr. Booker, you understand that you've just confessed to first-degree murder? I understand. I'm 73 years old, detective. I've been running for 20 years. Living in that RV, moving from place to place, never staying anywhere too long. Always looking over my shoulder. I'm tired. I just want it to be over. Why did you run in the first place? Why not turn yourself in? Booker laughed, a harsh sound. Turn myself in? I have prayers. I would have gotten life, or worse. I thought I could disappear, start over. And I did. For 20 years. But you can't really disappear anymore, can you? Everything's computers now. Cameras everywhere. I knew it was just a matter of time. Russo closed the folder. You stole 20 years from the Martinez family. 20 years of wondering, of hoping, of not knowing. Do you have anything you want to say to them? Booker looked directly at the camera for the first time. No, nothing I say would matter anyway. The interview ended at 3:47 p.m. Russo walked out of the room, took off his jacket, and sat in the hallway for 5 minutes, trying to process what he'd just heard. A man had been murdered over a brake job, over $400, over wounded pride and racism and entitlement. And a family had spent 20 years in agony because of it. He called Elena Martinez. We got his confession. All of it. Elena's voice was quiet. Did he say why? Why he killed my Danny? Russo hesitated. He couldn't tell her about Booker's racist slurs. Couldn't let her know that her husband had died because some bigot thought he'd been disrespected. It would hurt too much. He said they argued over the price of a repair. It escalated. He says he didn't plan to kill Danny, but he lost his temper. There was a long pause. Over a car repair? He killed my husband over a car repair? Yes, ma'am. Another pause. Then, thank you, Detective Russo. Thank you for not giving up on Danny. Russo's voice was thick. I wish I'd found him sooner, Mrs. Martinez. I'm sorry it took so long. You found him, Elena said. You brought him home. That's what matters. The trial of Raymond Booker began on March 5th, 2018, in Maricopa County Superior Court. Due to Booker's confession, the prosecution's case was straightforward but devastating. The state was represented by Senior Deputy County Attorney Thomas Caldwell, a 28-year veteran prosecutor known for his methodical approach to complex cases. The courtroom was packed every day. Elena sat in the front row, flanked by Sophia and Miguel. Behind them sat Danny's siblings, cousins, friends from the neighborhood, customers from the garage, members of the Unfinished Stories organization Sophia had founded. Detective Russo attended every day, sitting in the back, watching justice unfold. Booker, against his attorney's advice, had refused to plead guilty in exchange for a lesser sentence. He wanted a trial. He wanted, in some perverse way, to tell his story to a jury. Caldwell opened with a powerful statement. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about a good man who was lured to his death by a coward. Danny Martinez spent his life helping people. He fixed their cars. He worked with them on payment plans. He stayed open late. He came when they called for help. On the night of October 12th, 1997, he received a call from someone pretending to need help. Danny Martinez, being the man he was, responded. He drove into the night to help a stranger, and that stranger beat him to death with a tire iron, burned his body in the desert, and disappeared for 20 years while Danny's family suffered. The prosecution's case took 4 days. They presented Danny's toolbox, the belt buckle, the bone fragments, the DNA evidence, the trophy photograph, and most damning of all, the recorded confession. Forensic anthropologists testified about the condition of the remains. FBI agents testified about the identity theft. Deputy Kincaid testified about the traffic stop that had led to Booker's capture. On day 3, Elena Martinez took the stand. Caldwell asked her to describe Danny, to help the jury understand who he had been before he became a victim, before he became a cold case file. Elena spoke for 40 minutes, her voice steady, telling stories about Danny's generosity, his work ethic, his love for his family. She described what the last 20 years had been like, the birthdays without him, the weddings without him, the grandchildren he'd never met. Every day, she said, tears finally coming. Every single day I wondered where he was. Was he cold? Was he alone? Did he know we were looking for him? That we'd never stopped looking? And now I know that he died alone on a dark street, probably confused about why this was happening. My husband died trying to help someone, and that person killed him for it. By the time she finished, several jurors were wiping their eyes. The defense called no witnesses. Margaret Simmons, Booker's attorney, made a brief closing argument that essentially conceded guilt, but asked the jury to consider that Booker hadn't planned the murder, that it had been a spontaneous act of violence born from argument, not premeditation. Caldwell's rebuttal destroyed that argument. The defendant called Danny Martinez from a payphone so he couldn't be traced. He gave a fake address. He positioned himself to intercept Danny in a dark, isolated location. He brought a tire iron. This was not spontaneous. This was planned. And after killing Danny Martinez, the defendant burned his body to destroy evidence, stole his possessions, and fled. He lived under a false identity for 20 years. These are not the actions of someone who acted without thinking. These are the actions of a murderer who knew exactly what he'd done and tried to get away with it. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. They returned with a verdict of guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, kidnapping, theft, and identity theft. The sentencing hearing was held 2 weeks later, on March 23, 2018. Judge Patricia Morrison, a stern woman with 20 years on the bench, listened to victim impact statements from Eleanor, Sophia, and Miguel. Each spoke of the devastation Booker had caused, the years stolen, the memories erased. When it was Miguel's turn, he stood in his police uniform. "Your Honor, I became a police officer because of what happened to my father. I wanted to help find answers for families like mine. I wanted to make sure no one else had to wait 20 years to know the truth. The defendant took my father from me when I was 17 years old. He took my mother's husband. He took my sister's father. He took his grandchildren's grandfather. And he did all of this because he was angry about a car repair bill. That's what my father's life was worth to Raymond Booker. $400. Judge Morrison asked Booker if he had anything to say before sentencing. He stood, shackled, and said, "I've got nothing to say to these people. I did my time waiting. Now I'll do my time behind bars." Judge Morrison's response was swift and harsh. "Mr. Booker, you have shown no remorse for your actions. You murdered a good man in cold blood, disposed of his body like garbage, and spent 20 years as a fugitive while his family suffered. The law allows me to impose a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole for first-degree murder. In this case, that sentence is not only appropriate but necessary. You are hereby sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of Danny Martinez. Additionally, you are sentenced to 15 years for kidnapping, 5 years for theft, and 10 years for identity theft, all to run consecutively. You will spend the rest of your natural life in the custody of the Arizona Department of Corrections." The gavel fell. Raymond Booker was led out of the courtroom. He never looked back at the Martinez family. Outside the courthouse, Eleanor, Sophia, and Miguel stood with Detective Russo and spoke to the gathered media. "Today, justice was served," Elena said. "It took 20 years, but the truth came out. My husband can finally rest in peace, and our family can finally begin to heal." A reporter asked Miguel, still in his police uniform, what this moment meant to him. He thought for a long moment before answering. "It means my dad's story has an ending now. It means he's not a mystery anymore. He's not a cold case. He's Danny Martinez, a good man who was killed by an evil act. And now everyone knows what happened. That matters. That matters more than anything." Daniel Martinez was laid to rest on April 7, 2018, at St. Francis Cemetery in Phoenix. His funeral was attended by more than 400 people. The service was held at Immaculate Heart Church, where Danny and Elena had married in 1973, where their children had been baptized. Father Miguel Torres, who'd known the Martinez family for decades, delivered the eulogy. Danny Martinez was a man who believed in helping others, Father Torres said. He lived his faith, not through words, but through actions. Every time, he stayed late to fix someone's car. Every time he worked with someone who couldn't pay. Every time he answered an emergency call, even on a Sunday night when he should have been home with his family. He was living the gospel message of service. Evil tried to extinguish his light. But look around this church. Look at all the people whose lives he touched. His light still burns. Eleanor sat in the front pew, surrounded by family. The casket before her was closed. After 20 years in the desert, there was nothing to view. But it bore a photograph of Danny smiling in his garage, wearing his work shirt, holding his red toolbox. The toolbox, now marked as evidence, would eventually be returned to Eleanor. She planned to display it in the garage, a memorial to the man who'd owned it. After the service, the procession of cars that followed the hearse to the cemetery stretched for over a mile. At the graveside, Eleanor placed her hand on the casket and whispered words only Danny could hear. Sophia and Miguel stood on either side of their mother, their hands joined, a family incomplete but unbroken. The headstone, installed a month later, read, Danny Martinez, 1954-1997. Beloved husband, father, and friend. He lived to help others. But that wasn't the end of Danny's story. Eleanor continued to run Martinez Auto Repair until 2020, when at age 69, she finally retired. She sold the business to Paul Gomez, the mechanic who'd worked there for over 20 years, with one condition. The name had to stay the same. The garage is still there today, still painted yellow, still serving the South Phoenix community Danny loved. Sophia's organization, Unfinished Stories, has helped over 200 families navigate missing persons cases. The organization provides legal assistance, connects families with private investigators, and maintains pressure on law enforcement to keep cases active. In 2019, Sophia testified before the Arizona State Legislature in support of funding for cold case units across the state. The bill passed, allocating $5 million annually for cold case investigations statewide. Miguel Martinez rose through the ranks of Phoenix PD, making detective in 2008 and eventually joining the cold case unit in 2019. The same unit that had solved his father's case. He's credited with solving 12 cold cases in his first 4 years on the unit. In every interview, he mentions his father. "My dad taught me that you never give up on people. You keep showing up. You keep trying. You keep helping. That's what good police work is. It's not giving up." Detective James Russo retired in 2020, but remains in contact with the Martinez family. He attended Sophia's daughter's quinceañera in 2019 and Miguel's promotion ceremony in 2021. He says the Danny Martinez case was the most important of his career, not because it was the most complex, but because it reminded him why he became a detective in the first place. Raymond Booker remains in the Arizona State Prison Complex in Florence, Arizona. He'll die there. He's had no visitors, receives no mail, and spends his days in the prison woodshop, making furniture that's sold to fund victim compensation programs. He's 79 now. Prison medical records indicate he has stage 4 lung cancer. Doctors give him less than a year to live. He'll never be a free man again. The Martinez family holds an annual gathering at Danny's grave every October 12th. It's not a sad event, not anymore. They share stories, introduce new family members who never got to meet Danny, and celebrate the life he lived rather than mourn the years he lost. Eleanor, now 73, says these gatherings are her favorite day of the year. "Danny's with us," she says. "He's always been with us. Now we just know where to find him." In 2022, the Phoenix City Council voted to rename the block of East Van Buren Street, where Martinez Auto Repair sits, as Danny Martinez Way. The dedication ceremony drew hundreds of people. A plaque was unveiled that reads, "In memory of Danny Martinez, whose life of service to this community exemplified the best of Phoenix. His legacy lives on in every person who chooses to help a stranger, to stay late for someone in need, to answer the call for help." The intersection where Danny was killed, the location Booker finally revealed in a 2019 prison interview, is marked by a small memorial. Someone, the family never learned who, plants fresh flowers there on the 12th of every month. On October 12th, the flowers are always sunflowers. They were Danny's favorite. The story of Danny Martinez is a story about evil and loss, yes, but more than that, it's a story about perseverance, about a family that refused to accept unsolved, about a community that didn't forget, about a detective who wouldn't give up, about technology that brought justice when human memory failed, about the fundamental truth that evil, no matter how clever it thinks it is, no matter how well it hides, cannot hide forever. Danny Martinez lived 43 years. He was a husband for 24 of them, a father for 19, a business owner for 8. He fixed cars, he helped his neighbors, he loved his family. He should have lived to see his daughter graduate from college, to walk her down the aisle at her wedding, to hold his grandchildren. He should have lived to see his son become a police officer, to retire with his wife, to grow old in the house he'd painted yellow. Raymond Booker took all of that, but he couldn't take Danny's legacy. He couldn't take the impact Danny had on his community. He couldn't stop Sophia from helping other families find answers. He couldn't stop Miguel from becoming the kind of police officer who solves cold cases and brings closure. He couldn't stop Elena from keeping the garage open, keeping Danny's dream alive. In the end, Danny Martinez won. His goodness outlasted Raymond Booker's evil. His memory survived Booker's attempt to erase him. His family healed, even with the scar he left behind. That's the real story. Not the murder, not even the solution, but the persistence of love in the face of hate. The persistence of hope in the face of despair. The persistence of justice in the face of time. Danny Martinez didn't just get justice after 20 years. He got something better. He got remembered. Not as a victim, not as a cold case, but as a man who lived a life of service and love. As a husband, a father, a friend, a mechanic who stayed late on a Sunday night to help a stranger. That stranger killed him. But strangers also found him. Strangers also solved his case. Strangers also marked his grave with flowers every month. Because that's what Danny Martinez inspired in people. The desire to help, to care, to not give up. His story ends with a casket in the ground at St. Francis Cemetery. But his legacy continues in a garage on Danny Martinez Way, in a non-profit helping missing persons families, in a Phoenix Police Department cold case detective who shares his DNA, in grandchildren who never met him but know his name and his story. Raymond Booker tried to erase Danny Martinez from the world. Instead, he ensured Danny would never be forgotten. That's justice, the truest kind. If this story moved you, if you believe that no case should ever be forgotten, if you think families deserve answers no matter how much time has passed, please share this. Share it with someone who appreciates true crime, someone who believes in the power of persistence, someone who needs to be reminded that justice, even delayed, still matters. What do you think could be done to help solve more cold cases like Danny's? How can we make sure families don't have to wait 20 years for answers? Comment below with your thoughts. Every unsolved case represents a family still waiting, still hoping, still living with questions that haunt them every single day. Your engagement, your shares, your comments, your subscriptions helps bring attention to these cases. It keeps them in the public eye. It reminds law enforcement that people care, that we are watching, that we demand justice for the forgotten. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. These aren't just cases. They're people, they're families, they're lives that matter. Danny Martinez mattered. And thanks to a family that never gave up, a detective who kept digging, and a community that refused to forget, his story finally has the ending it deserved. Not the ending he deserved, but the ending his story deserved. Truth, justice, closure. Sometimes they just take 20 years.